Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Fairley. I'm a 2012 Civic Fellow. I'm a senior, class 2013, a major in psychology, double minor, criminal justice, and Arabic. My experience was a little bit different than everyone else's. I didn't save children's lives or do anything like that. But I worked in the government. But it was civically impactful in a different way. So that's what I'm here to talk about. I studied the effect of the protection of others and the use of force within the United States Marshal Service. And just like an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. Excuse me. I have introduction, research questions, and just kind of like my time throughout the Marshal Service and then the data that I used to just, I guess, find what I need to find with questions that I had. Some controversies involving use of force have been Rodney King, Trayvon Martin, and then I found another one in 2012. It was kind of like, I guess, brushed under the rug because I didn't hear very much about it, but there was an Empire State Building shooter. And basically, he went to the Empire State Building, and he was just a person that had just gotten really angry at just his job, the people that he worked with, and he shot and killed 2 people. But that wasn't really the controversy. The controversy comes in when the police officers who tried to stop him ended up shooting the gunman and then injuring 9 other people along with him. So really it brought to mind a lot of questions about use of force and what are the procedures involved and the regulations that are to be had with with different agencies and law enforcement officers. So I use my obviously psychology background and criminal justice minors to basically understand the psychology behind their decisions. When do you pull the trigger? So I had 3 research questions. The first was just kind of, do officers use force more often to protect themselves or to protect others? The second was, what type of force or weapons are most commonly used in the protection of themselves or others? And then, does the type of force or weapon vary based on the type of reason for the use of force? And this is where I worked with the U.S. Marshal Service. Just some overall facts and figures in case you don't know. The U.S. Marshal Service is the oldest federal law enforcement agency in America's history. It was started by George Washington in 1789. There are 94 presidentially appointed U.S. Marshals that go over or oversee all the judicial districts within the country, and almost 4,000 deputy U.S. Marshals. And criminal investigators are U.S. Marshals, but they don't have a marshal over them. So basically, at headquarters, every person that works in headquarters is a criminal investigator, not a U.S. Marshal, because there's no district in headquarters that has a U.S. Marshal. And headquarters is in Arlington, Virginia, which is where I worked over the summer. Some of the major duties and the most important duties of the U.S. Marshals are, they were founded, they were founded just to protect the federal judiciary. So they were the ones who went around and protected judges, the federal judges that were working either in the Supreme Court or just throughout the nation. They apprehend fugitives. If you ever seen the show Manhunters, that's what they do. They pride themselves in really being able to find people in any kind of way. They're a lot different. They're not air marshals, which is what most people think. So they don't fly on planes. What they do is they transport prisoners. So have you ever heard of JPATS? Which is the Justice, Prisoner, and Alien Transportation System. They go through and they find, basically, when they find the people, they will transport them to different prisons to wherever they need to be transported. And then, of course, the Witness Security Protection Program, which is actually mostly former felons and former prisoners, because people are actually coming out to get them. So you would think that it would be people that are just kind of like the guy that stood in this corner and saw someone else saw a crime, but really it's more the people that are affected with the crime, and then other people, after they got out of jail, are trying to find them and kill them. So that's pretty interesting to find out. This is me at Office of Inspection. And so basically in the Office of Inspection, we're kind of like the principal's office or like the Inspector General of the U.S. Marshal Service. So whenever they would have interviews, interviewing people for like the wrongdoings that they did, they weren't really happy, and I always sat like in the front, so I didn't really get the warmest of welcomes seeing me there. I got to read and bring a lot of influence into cases that were active cases with shootings whether they be dog shootings or just person-to-person shootings. I went through in the very end through about 5,000 files along with the other interns of just like old records of stuff from like way back in the 80s and 70s of people that had like just done terrible things within the Marshal Service, either emails that people had sent that were wrong, or just kind of the stuff that people would do like through the email in the government is just ridiculous, and it was atrocious to just like go through and just to see how many times they had been convicted. But anyways, so after going through that, I started focusing more on just kind of what my research questions were. And I worked with the Office of Inspection or Internal Affairs. That's the reason why there's so many vowels up there. But they're transitioning, so they have to have like both of them now. Excuse me. And their responsibilities are mostly just investigating allegations of like misconduct, so that's well as like the principal's office. And they also compile just yearly reports about what is going on with the Marshal Service, how many shootings there were, how many people were convicted of like misusage of the internet, how many people, that kind of thing. So I mostly focused on just the shootings and the misconduct that were attributed to those. This is the use of force. And of the fiscal reports that I was talking about, I focused with the use of force reports and the use of force form. Basically what the use of force form is filled out for every instance that there's been a gun fired or a person taken down and some survivors. Sorry, it's cold going around, I guess. So I focused on 3 pieces of information on the use of force form itself. I focused on, here it is, okay. I focused on the type of force used, the protecting others box, and really just this section right here. This is really what I focused on, and tried to take as much information as I could from that, from the 380 forms that I received. I just compiled like listings and put them all together. This is the data from the past 5 years for the use of force. If you look closely, you'll see that physical control has gone up. Chemical mutations and munitions, which are kind of at the bottom, have gone down a little bit. Firearm discharge was raised up throughout the years. And then stun weapons were also raised, but expandable batons were lowered. Some of these, like, you can't really see at the very bottom. It's really because like they're the chemical mutants, munitions, which are really just like OC sprays. So basically, as you see like tear gas and things like that, or just like if you see a person with OC spray, no one really likes to use those because with OC spray, it's a directed shot more, but there's still a lot of back spray. So if you're standing with your partner and you're trying to like OC spray someone, like you're gonna get the same effects that they're getting. So really, no one wins in the end. It's easier just to use a projectile stun guns. So those are just easy. You can just, it's like a gun. You just shoot it and it's like a taser. Other than that, another thing that wasn't really, you can't really see very many of is expandable batons, because I'm not very sure who really uses those anymore or even carries them around. Maybe in England or something, but it's not here. So not many people really carry those around. So like the forces, the number of instances have gone down to nearly 1 to 0. Let's see. This is some of the current research. I took the last year where the 391 is. I took the fiscal year 11 and studied that because that was the most current research that I could have the full year for. So as I said, I researched the fiscal year 2011. I used 3 out of 21 categories, as listed before. The type of force used by the law enforcement officer, that's what LEO stands for. The protection of self and the protection of others. And I ran crosstabs within SPSS to try to define the differences between the type of force used by the officer and the reasons why they stated that they use that type of force. And here are the cases that I researched. We have 162 protected cases where the officer said that he protected himself, 129 where the officer said he protected others, preventing escape, and then it goes on. But 28 of the protected self cases were protecting themselves and others. So they felt that themselves and others were in danger when they used their force. Here we have just the basic statistics, just a reminder of the forces that were used. The biggest column right here, or I guess the biggest piece of the pie is the projectile stun guns, and then next to that is the physical control. Yeah, so those are the two biggest and most widely used. Here are just the crosstabs that I have. I don't expect you guys to be able to read this, but it's just kind of like showing the differences and whether or not they said they protected themselves while they were using their force. And here, I found some different kind of analysis, not really what I was expecting. But the percentage differences weren't very high. More than likely is because I didn't have a very big sample size. There's only 380 cases in 1 year of my analysis. But hardly any officers were I guess like protecting themselves when they used the stun gun. Mostly when they were protecting themselves, there was the use of a firearm or more of a deadly force. Because I guess as humans, when we feel that we're endangered, we want to really make sure that we clearly define and clearly eliminate the danger that's presented toward us, as opposed to maybe missing with a projectile stun gun or other things where you really wouldn't know for sure. This was, however, different. This is the crosstabs for protecting others. It's a little bit different because the percentages, again, weren't very high, but the officers protecting others more than likely use the projectile stun gun, which is, again, I guess you would feel, not only is it just that you're not protecting yourself anymore, but if you're shooting, you'd rather accidentally tase someone as opposed to accidentally shoot them, the person that was getting attacked. So, and others would also be in protection of other officers that were on the scene. But the results for using a firearm were very similar, whether or not the officer felt that he was shooting to protect others' lives or not. But it was mostly the use of projectile stun guns. So in the end, so the crosstabs basically showed just that officers, as stated before, did not use the projectile stun gun often when protecting themselves. Instead, use the projectile stun gun more when they're protecting others, and then again with protecting themselves for firearms. My conclusion and just kind of future research. For my first question of is the force used by officers more often to protect themselves or to protect others, really just depends on the weapon. This doesn't include instances where officers say they protected themselves and others, but it really depends on the weapon that the assailant, the fugitive, was using towards them, and it depends on the type of weapon that they decided to use. And what kind of weapons were most commonly used, I found, were projectile stun guns, just because it's easier, it's a lot less hassle, it's a lot easier to walk into the Inspector General's office and just say I use a stun gun because I didn't feel I was safe or I didn't feel my partner was safe, as opposed to going in and saying I decided to shoot him even though he was unarmed. It's a lot harder to go to get those cases passed, or I guess reasoned. And then does the type of force or weapon vary based on the reasoning for the use of force? And the answer is just yes, it does. More research is going to be needed just in the future because I had a small sample size. Also, the year that I studied, in 2010, the year before that, the fiscal year before that, 2 deputy U.S. Marshals were shot in the line of duty. So there was kind of just an air around the entire service, just that to be more alert and more on your guard. So you could see the spike in the type of force that was used. So it was pretty, it was pretty interesting just to see that, and just to see how having the 2 officers shot, which has been the most that they've had in the history for having 2 shot in 1 year, just how that would change the dynamics. more investigation also in the patterns of use of force and reasoning behind it, just in broader scales. More services, more using local sheriff's departments, using more federal agencies, that kind of thing. But yeah, so that's my conclusion. In the end, I'd just like to thank everyone that was involved. The Burhans family, thank you very much. The Center for Civic Engagement, Cassie Price, the U.S. Marshals Service and Office of Inspection, and then my professor, Dr. Lambert.